If you are not speaking, could you please mute yourself? That's lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Right. I believe I'm screen sharing now. So I just want to say thank you very much for joining us this evening. Misleadingly, I'm not the person I appear to be on the screen. That's my work name, and I gave up work on Saturday, Sunday time, so I'm just adjusting, and I haven't changed my name on there. It's Kirsty Martin. I'm the current chair of the WGA, having started in that role just very recently, and we are slightly light on numbers tonight because this was the first possible opportunity I had to hold this meeting. So I apologise for that, and we will revert to other days for future years, but thanks everyone for coming along. We've got a number of speakers with us this evening. So you'll see Jessica Trahar with us from, she's the head of delivery from the Regional Delivery Directorate, which is somewhat complicated, and she's going to demystify that for us, and she's going to take some questions. The key thing is she works very closely with Hannah Waterhouse, who you will all know. AJ is with us from Wiltshire Council, who most of you will know from government development, and she's going to talk about some of the initiatives that they have and anything else that you would like to talk about. Something that we've been working on is a governor recruitment document, which is still in progress, but we'll get there soon. David's going to talk about our website launch a bit later on, and then at the end of the meeting we will have our AGM, which would be great if you could stay on for. It won't take too long because a lot of it is fairly straightforward, but we will be introducing our new constitution, which we've amended, and we've drawn up a memorandum of understanding with the local authority. And just to remind you that everyone can be a member of the WGA, it's all free, and if you can encourage people to come along and join us, that would be absolutely marvellous. It's very voluntary, and we're all part of the WGA. So that's really all I have to say on that one. Some of you will have heard me say at the top that my internet is very dodgy. So if I disappear out of vision, it will probably be because it's collapsed, and David is going to sing and dance and tap dance around the edges while I'm trying to get back online. So we'll start with Jess, and if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat, and David will moderate, and we'll ask Jess some of the questions at the end. But the floor is yours now.
Thank you. I will attempt to share my screen. Is that working? And can you hear me?
It is, and we can.
Okay, so I will attempt to demystify who we are, who I am. But firstly, thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. It's great to kind of be at this type of meeting with such a wide range of governors across Wiltshire. So I'm Jess Trahar. I work in, as you said, Hannah Waterhouse's office, so the South West Regional Schools Commissioner's office. But to complicate the matters, we're part of the Regional Delivery Directorate at DFE. So that's what RDD stands for. And I will talk through a bit about our role, and then talk through kind of current priorities for us. And as you might expect, I will focus a lot around developing multi-academy trusts, and particularly in the context of COVID and recovery. A couple of questions I have in my slides as I go along, but it would be great to pick them up at the end. And so just to say about me, my role covers what we deem as the Wessex region, which is slightly arbitrary, but it's a sub-part of the Southwest, and I oversee 4 teams that work with local authorities and in local authority areas across Wiltshire, but also Swindon, BCP and Dorset. So I have a Wiltshire team that sits beneath me, Peter Apostolou, who some of you may know, but I've got his contact details in my slides, which I can share. It's the team leader, and you can always get in touch with one of us. And just to say that my background is, I joined this team, and I joined the DFE during the pandemic about 18 months ago, but I came from a higher education background where I've worked in regulation at a national level, policy around access to HE, particularly for pupils from disadvantaged groups, and also did a stint working in undergraduate admissions at Bristol Uni. So there's quite a lot of overlap between schools and HE. So just briefly, what do we do? What's our role? Key role of RDD and for the Southwest team is oversight of academies in the region. So that's holding trust to account, including free schools. It's engaging with both single academy trusts and multi-academy trusts, particularly around growth, intervention where issues arise, and academy transfers. We do a lot of work working with trusts in terms of developing capabilities. So we facilitate action learning sets and run a number of trust leader events and different groups around school improvements and EDI. So there's quite a big strand of work that we undertake there. We're responsible for assessing any new free schools, so any new waves of free schools, and that's through from an application process to open a new free school up to all the way through the capital process, working with colleagues in capital, with local authorities and trusts until free schools are open. We also work closely with the LA on any presumption free schools that come directly from the LA. And we have a role in assessing sufficiency and people place planning across the region. And we work very closely with people place planning officers in local authorities to ensure there's sufficient places, and that links into viability of schools and looking at both surplus and lack of places in different areas and how we can work together to resolve that. And then we have a big strand of work looking at school improvement, and that covers all schools, but obviously working very closely with local authorities. Where appropriate, we particularly implement at the moment a trust and school improvement offer, which is referred to as TSI, where we match vulnerable schools and indeed trusts with strong system leaders. So they might be national leaders of education or strong trust leaders to provide targeted peer-to-peer school improvement support. And then finally, we have a role in terms of facilitating across the region the embedding of the new teaching school hubs. I'm sure some of you are aware that in Wiltshire that is run by Glenmore and Winton. And again, we'll work closely across the region with a number of stakeholders to ensure that that's rolling out in the best way possible. So this was one of my questions for you. So it would be great to get some feedback at the end of my presentation. But in terms of all of our engagement with schools, with trusts, with local authorities, with parents across the last, I say 18 months that I've been here, but particularly recently, these are kind of the key issues that we're focused on and that we're taking back into our work and feeding back into Central DFE in terms of what matters to schools at this time. So the COVID response, absolutely at the top of, I would imagine every school's agenda, putting in place additional measures, the pressure on staff, dealing with outbreaks, dealing with attendance, dealing with persistent absence, parental anxieties, more recently, anti-vax protests, changes in demographics and cost pressures. We're also picking up that there are difficulties in parts of the region around recruiting new staff, particularly teaching assistants, and some questions about capital supply chain linked to the kind of the national picture around that and the implications for schools. Ofsted inspections, obviously in the press very recently, post-pandemic, and the impact of those on schools at the moment, but equally the quid pro quo in terms of providing information to parents and to us about how things are going in schools. Send, I think, is a big issue across the region, and the need to create more places. We see that more acutely in some areas than others, but it feels it's at the top of many's list. And wanting to work together and collaboratively to construct a strong school improvement capacity in one place. But if there's something glaring on there that I've missed, I would really love to have your feedback. And in terms of the priorities for us as a team and for Hannah as the Regional Schools Commissioner, absolutely the first priority is around understanding the implications of COVID on learning and progress, and particularly in relation to disadvantage. Attendance, we're increasingly seeing persistent absence as a big issue. And leadership and the challenges of leadership within such a turbulent environment. Quality and standards in the region. So I mentioned earlier our work to bring and develop networks of strong trust, so to share practice and to work together on key issues. We really are focused on trying to intervene early when vulnerabilities are evident, and to basically stop failure fast, and doing that in partnership. I've mentioned around recruitment and retention of staff, and particularly using our teaching school hubs. And then much more structural work around growing strong trusts, working with maintained schools and SATs and bringing capacity, trying to gain support, and working with vulnerable trusts in areas which need input from new trusts. And then I've mentioned our work on places and sufficiency, but particularly SEND, and a particular focus for us is free school builds for new special schools, and a number of complex challenges that we're navigating there. And then specifically for Wiltshire, I've done a bit of an overview on the right hand side, which most of you are probably aware of. In terms of the makeup of schools in the region, the strategic priorities for our team stem very much from those for the southwest. There are some specifics there around supporting vulnerable and inadequate schools in the area. We work really closely with the local authority on COVID challenges. AJ can probably say, but probably sick of hearing from us some days. Trying to understand what the challenges are and see what we can do essentially to try and relieve some pressure or address issues. We're running a programme of trust reviews, so that had been paused over the last 18 months, but we've picked it up this year, and that's our accountability mechanism with trusts, talking about growth but also any vulnerabilities. We are doing a lot of work, and many of you may have been engaged with this, Hannah in particular, running roundtables, wanting to be proactive in talking with SATs about the potential to join or establish MATs. And we're also working very closely with our diocesan partners, particularly Clifton and the Diocese of Salisbury. Looking at potential cold spots in the area where we may want to try and bring some capacity from trusts in, and again looking at these issues around SEND and also vulnerable small schools and how we can work collaboratively to support them. I won't go into too much detail here, but COVID recovery is clearly the number one priority. So just wanted to provide a bit of detail there in terms of the support that the department is providing. So a big investment on recovery spend, particularly relevant, I think, here is funding to support catch up to schools. More laptops are being distributed. And then more investment in programs such as the National Tutoring Programme, teacher training and mental health, and during the summer, successful summer school programme, including in specialist settings. So just moving on to our other big priority, and a big priority for the government, around the development of strong multi-academy trusts. And I've got a quote here which was from the previous Secretary of State, but the current Secretary of State has reaffirmed this as a priority. Um, this vision for every school to be part of a family of schools in a strong multi-academy trust. We think, and obviously we'll welcome views on this in discussion, pre-pandemic, the value of strong maths was clear, but COVID has made that much more apparent and much more stark. The ability to provide support across a number of schools and to implement COVID measures on a systematic um, basis. And we think the challenge of recovery will be harder for pupils in struggling schools, and particularly those disadvantaged pupils. And a priority for us is that we need good schools and trusts to support that. And I just wanted to say a bit about the narrative around the academy landscape. So um, it's definitely shifting from us encouraging every school that wants to convert, to us being much more proactive, in terms of wanting every school ideally part of a strong family of schools, and moving on from a dual system towards a single model of all schools within a trust. But I want to emphasise that there's no fixed trajectory for this and no hard target, nor are we compelling schools to convert, or to join MATs. Um, but we certainly see this about collaboration and looking at the best structures for individual schools. And then just to finish, I've just pulled out a few points from our point of view in terms of what we think great trusts do well. Um, so I won't run through all of this, but particular focus on improvement, and a clear vision and purpose that very clearly links to the needs of local children and young people. Obviously, this is not just trusts that do this, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a moment, but it's definitely something that we feel that trusts do well. This point that we've particularly seen during the pandemic is this ability to deploy staff more flexibly, to enable teachers to develop, provide high quality CPD centrally, and then share practice between schools. They also do recognise the context and the expertise of different schools coming together, and we see a lot of good examples of kind of a collaborative approach, not a kind of dictating approach, and drawing on the strengths of different schools that come into a trust. And then points around removing workload and some of the burdens that and efficiencies that you get from centralizing processes. And I think above all, using that kind of convening power and centralized approach to empower schools to focus more closely on teaching. And then just to finish up, just a couple of kind of new policies, particularly related to trusts, as you might expect. So we have a trust capacity fund, which is competitive, £24 million of funding over this financial year to help trusts to develop capacity to grow, particularly by taking on underperforming schools. We've also put in place the trust partnership programme, which enables a school to temporarily partner with a trust, often referred to informally as try before you buy, but so that schools can make a much more informed decision about converting, and the benefits of joining a particular trust. The trust and school improvement offer I've mentioned, and then finally we have provided some funding to pilot an approach with a small number of dioceses to create new strong faith trusts for Church of England and Catholic schools. and particularly relevant to this region is funding to support the Clifton Diocese to do this. So I'm going to end there and see if I can stop sharing. Can people see me? Yes.
We can see. Thank you very much for that. That's a lot of information to
Yes.
assimilate. So I don't think there have been any questions in the chat, unless David, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So has anyone got any questions that they would like to put to Jess? Stick your hands up, and then we can take them.
Can I see? Is that? Oh no, it was my hand on the screen. It was my little cursor like that. I thought it was a hand.
Okay, well, look, I'll kick off with a question then, because we haven't got any yet. So, you said that you were looking for cold spots where there should be mats. What are the cold spots that you've identified?
Oh gosh, off the top of my head. Probably more generally, I could come back to you, more kind of rural areas where we're seeing a number of small schools that may be struggling, particularly looking at places. Yes, you put me on the spot, Kirsty. Trying to think off the top of my head.
About that.
I will come back to you, but particularly rural areas.
Okay, and how does that leave local authority schools? Are they going to be pushed to join MATs, or are they? Chris, I'm just muting you. Thanks, you've gone. Are they going to be pushed from local authority into MAT control, or how are you going to actually make people move? Because I don't think you can make people move either from local authority control or from SATs.
No, we don't have the powers to do that unless there's an intervention mechanism. So, for example, if a local authority school receives an inadequate Ofsted judgment, then the Regional Schools Commissioner can issue an academy order. But I think I said during my presentation, we're absolutely not looking to force or compel schools to join a trust. What we would like to see, and we would be keen to work with schools, is to explore potential options if they wish to do that for different trusts in the area that might suit their needs and provide more support for particular schools. There's no kind of forcing, and I think the local authority in Wiltshire, I can't imagine AG might want to comment, but that Wiltshire local authority has that agenda either. So we absolutely see this as a collaborative approach.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, and I think I'll come on to that bit as well of about that collaboration, and it's that landscape, isn't it, that we find ourselves in. So yeah.
Jo, you've got your hand up.
Hi. Oh yeah, head on the. I hadn't looked on the video. It's just a quick one, really. At the bottom of your last slide, you talked about the strengthening of the faith character multi-academy trusts. Why? I guess the question would comes to why. Basically, partly because that removes choice for parents in local areas. The more schools that belong to faith character trusts, the less choice there is for parents in that area. So is there a particular reason behind that?
Yeah, so we've definitely, and I should say the Clifton example is kind of driven by the Bishop strategy for Clifton schools. We've definitely seen across the country issues where we've had very vulnerable schools that may have received an inadequate judgment from Ofsted without adequate support and without a trust structure that they can move into. So a lack of faith trusts. So that has driven wanting to pump prime some of the support to dioceses that haven't been able to resource that themselves. It's been particularly stark in some areas in the southwest, and the kind of background there is wanting to be in line with the wishes of faith schools or the CES and the Church of England Education Service to maintain the value of church education. So I think it's had a kind of two-pronged, I guess, driver, that there are a lack of faith trusts for particular schools to join. I think in terms of taking away choice, that is the gift of the diocesan schools. Again, we're not forcing particular schools to join, but it would be driven by that particular strategy of the diocese.
Yeah, no, sorry, I was thinking more about choice for parents. Actually, I'm
Parents,
conscious.
yeah.
I am very conscious that both CES Catholic schools are increasing the number of schools that they now have control over, and just as a landscape, it's a wider landscape. That's interesting as to what's happening to our school structures. To be honest, but yeah, okay, thank you.
Can I ask a little bit actually about that? Because a lot of the village schools that we have in Wiltshire are associated to the diocese, and that means that they can't join any other MATs other than the diocese at the moment. Is there any encouragement for the diocese to relax that on the basis that MAT structures should recognise the identity of those schools?
I think to an extent, I think we're often treading that line where we want to respect the wishes of the diocese as well as the needs of the schools, and as Jo says, the parental choice. There's increasingly more trusts that are taking on mixed articles, particularly Church of England articles, which enables them to take Church of England schools into their trust. Less so, I think, off the top of my head, with regard to Catholic schools. So there is a little bit of flexibility around that, but we don't. I think we may have a power if we wanted to use it to try and force the diocese to accept a non-church or non-mixed trust, but we absolutely wouldn't want to use that. We'd want to work in collaboration with the diocese and to look at what is the best solution for that school and for the children that will attend that school.
Has anyone got any other questions, or should I carry on interrogating Jess?
I've got a question. So I clicked on the applause button rather than raise my hand button.
Well, that's very kind of you, David. Thank you.
All right. Part of the evidence base that is presented by you, Jessica, but also by many other people within the DFE, of the quality of multi-academy trusts. What is cited is the strength and ability to respond during the pandemic. Now, I've heard that mentioned on a number of occasions. I haven't yet seen any evidence of it. I haven't seen any research papers that have indicated it. And was there any research to look at whether single academy trusts were responding with quality and increased ability? Because it feels like it's a statement in order to explain a political direction than a statement of fact. And forgive me if that's a bit of a challenge.
No, that's fine. It's a fair challenge. I don't know off the top of my head if there was particular research done around single academy trusts. I think we do speak from a lot of experience over the pandemic. It's at work seeing how different types of schools were responding, and we've definitely seen a lot of evidence, be it anecdotal or through commissioned evidence, that being in a strong structure where you have a bit more capacity to respond, to move staff around quickly, to support staff within a bigger context, has had a positive impact. there was some timely research released today, which might be worth having a look at, which was a survey of schools that have joined trusts and their experience of doing that, and it covers a number of areas, and I think including their experience in the pandemic. But it's a fair challenge, David, and we are civil servants committed to kind of delivering on the vision for the government, and absolutely not saying every standalone school was unable to respond, but we do see that there's a lot of evidence that being in a trust did contribute to strength.
But one other question, a completely different track, if that's okay. I'd be interested to know what sort of response you're getting across the region for the current vaccination programme, because our experience, and it's a shared experience across a number of schools, is that it's not being delivered effectively or efficiently.
I think it's definitely been mixed. I think there's been some delays, obviously, in the rollout, and I think it has increased recently, and we've had more positive feedback recently. But a number of schools have also suffered, and particularly teachers and leadership teams, with protests that have tried to derail the rollout. So I think it's improving. I would encourage, if there is particular feedback from anyone that you want to share with us, it's always really helpful. We feed that back into the central team that's rolling out. So if there's any specifics, please do get in touch, and we can feed that back.
Okay. Thank you.
Chris,
Anyone else?
I can see Chris Hicks got his hand up.
John's just got his hand up as well.
Oh, sorry.
Or rather, he's waving, but I think so. Chris Hicks, do you want to go first, and then we'll take John next?
Thank you. Yes, with all this emphasis on MATs being the panacea for improvement, there are a lot of local authority schools who are doing quite well at the moment and are apprehensive about moving to a MAT because of the lack of clarity of lines of responsibility and accountability. I don't know if you want to comment on that at all.
So I guess my suggestion would be for those schools to speak to some trusts, or speak to some schools that have joined trust, to understand how it feels being in a trust, and I do think the more that you can do that, to understand in reality how does it feel, the better, because I think there's probably some truth in it, but there's also a lot of myths that people pick up. You don't need to, what am I trying to say? It can, in most cases, be very collaborative, and I think for school to see opportunities, and I really would encourage, if you have those kind of concerns, to speak to some trusts. We can facilitate that, just to understand how that might feel. But as I said before, there's no, we're not compelling every school at this time to join a trust, but would encourage you to explore it as an option, and whether it is right for the school in your context.
And what happens to the role of governors in a MAT?
So generally in a trust, if you moved into a MAT, the school would have establish a local governing body as part of the MAT's governance structure. So that would still continue to represent the needs of the school and of the local community. So you don't lose that in terms of the governing body. You do have the layer above of the trust board and the members.
John, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. Very, very interesting. I've got a nitty-gritty question, if you don't mind. I was very, very interested in your slide where you said you looked at priorities for the RDDSW,
Yeah.
And you mentioned leadership, which of course is fully understandable, but you've also got attendance. So my nitty-gritty question, how do you plan to deal with that then? You know, what's your strategy for dealing with issues like that, you know, which are a bit more down to earth, aren't they?
Yeah. So would I say early days? There's early days in terms of some initiatives. So we've been looking proactively at schools, standalone schools and schools within trusts that have a high percentage, so over 25% of persistent absence. And we are starting to reach out to those schools to offer support either through the Trust and School Improvement Offer, which we've talked about, particularly focused on persistent absence, but also, and the department is contracting some specific expertise in terms of attendance advisors, and I think they're linked in some cases to a local authority. So we are targeting particular schools where we're seeing a significant proportion of persistent absence. And sorry, I was just going to say I do expect that to continue to grow.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to ask a very quick question about Ofsted, because I saw today that they've just announced that they want every school, is correct, every school to be Ofsteded before, I know that's probably not a verb, by 2025, which is quite a lot of schools to get through at quite short notice. Do you have any idea how effective those inspections will be? And I know there is a concern about schools that have been outstanding, who've not been inspected for a long time, who may lose their status, but also there is a suspicion that other schools may be downgraded as part of the MATS policy. Do you have any views on that?
I mean, I'm probably not in a position to comment on the quality of their inspections. It's for Ofsted to comment on that. That isn't me trying to get out. They are an independent regulator. What I would say is that announcement has come off the back of a significant increase in funding for Ofsted through the spending review. So in terms of capacity, that will be fueling that. But again, we do meet with Ofsted regularly, and we're always happy to feed back concerns, and we obviously pick these up in regular discussions with schools and trusts and with local authorities. But Kirsty, I'm very happy if people do have particular concerns that you'd like us to feedback. We'd be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. And David, you've got another question.
Again, on a slightly different tack, if that's okay. Recently, the National Leaders of Governors programme has changed, and what the DFE has appeared to have done is reconstructed it on the basis of focusing on schools that are failing, rather than on the provision of support to governors and schools. I just wondered if you had any comments on that.
I have to confess I'm not sure, David. I do know it has been reconfigured, but I probably don't want to speculate in terms of that.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. It's really, yeah. You can't. You honestly.
I don't deal with everything.
Yeah, I was going to say you can't know everything. That's right.
Okay. Any more for any more? All right. Well, that's really great. Thank you ever so much for talking to us this evening and for taking questions on lots of subjects. I appreciate it's a big challenge to answer all of them. It would be useful, I think, to those of us who are governing in SATs and local authority schools to see some of the evidence about MATS, and if you have any of that you could let us have and we could share with our boards, because as David was saying earlier, we hear an awful lot about the advantages, but there's very little evidence that's actually presented to us. I think we'd all be interested in seeing that. But thank you for coming along this evening, and hope you can stay with us a little bit longer. But I know you've got young people as well, so
I will stay if that's okay, probably until about
Okay.
7, and just listen to AJ. But I was going to say I'd be my contact details, and Peter, my Wiltshire team leader's contact details on the slide. So I'm happy for those to be circulated, and I'll send a couple of links as well to you, David, to go round.
that's great. What we'll probably do is put the recording online on the website as well, so that those who haven't been able to attend this evening can catch up as well. So thank you very much. AJ, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Kirsty. I dropped out because my internet connection, so now it's disabled the shared hosting. So if you could just put me back on, then I can share my slides. Sorry about that. Thanks, Jessica. It's so good to hear more about our educational environment, isn't it, particularly around Wiltshire, and it helps us to piece pieces together of the jigsaw, and that's what we are as governors, isn't it? And my absolute passion is about how do we support good governance. So I'm going to share a little bit of that with you tonight. Now, when I was, the remit of this, I thought really long and hard about what I shared with you, actually, because I don't want it just to be this is what we do in school governance. So this is about governance. And I think governance is absolutely crucial. A little bit about myself. I'm AJ Cripps. I've been with the local authority for 2 years now. I cannot quite believe that. I joined just 2 years ago this month. And so had a couple of months before lockdown happened. I've only just worked out that John O'Gaunt is just down the road from St Augustine School, because I have no understanding of that geography in that respect. So I still see that as a challenge as part of my governance. So I always, whenever I start something or another piece of work with a school or another piece of work with, some clusters or collaborations, I think it's context, isn't it? For me, it's always, what is the context of this? What are the contexts of where they are? What is their context? So what can I bring with regards to my context? Because I've been involved in education since I graduated, and I'm really passionate about education. I was a secondary teacher, and my governance journey began 12 years ago, and that was in a maintained school. I've worked and supported very different schools, but my governance journey has gone from maintained. I've also been in standalone academies, also chair of directors or chair of trustees for a MAT as well, so a newly formed MAT. So the journey, I've been on a really good steep learning curve of journey, and that's been with secondaries and primary schools as well. And I found that fascinating because actually, for me, that has helped me to understand much more about governance. So just my first slide really was just to get us, and it was really great to see that Jessica is a firm believer in a little bit of context as well. I love to see that, and that's great. So for us in Wiltshire, it is quite a large county. It does have that massive block in the middle of the Salisbury Plain. So for us, I work for the LA, but I'm leader of the School Governance Services, which is a traded service. So schools buy in the support for that, and we also have clerking within that. So we have 235 schools in Wiltshire, and around about 1,800 governors, which it makes you swallow a bit, doesn't it? It's a massive amount of volunteers coming to support school improvement with their schools, and I think mentioning that word volunteers again is really crucial, and that is why I got into governance. One, I love strategy, and that was where when I started to have children, and I couldn't be involved in that middle senior leadership anymore, and I really enjoyed the strategy. But also when I started to get into governance, I actually worked out poor governors, they got a lot to do. So how do we support them within the leadership and management to be able to do what they've got to do really effectively? And a bit of my mantra of everything I talk about this year is actually about how do we work smarter, not harder? Because I do believe governors work really hard, but I think we have to work smarter. And that is really what governance for me is about in Wiltshire. it is about how I support you in doing that. So a little bit more context, you know, there's all these different types of schools. So, you know, I'm not going to go read through them all, you can see all of those. And then I started to, you know, so I use a lot of this data anyway when I'm looking at everything, because I, you know, as I've said before, I like context. So how, you know, we've got lots of different schools in Wiltshire. And so this is our Wiltshire, our educational context for Wiltshire. And that for me is crucial, because governance is in all of those contexts. Governance is good governance. And so how do we and how do I within Wiltshire support you around good governance is really interesting. Just recently done a little bit of work with David looking at standalone, our standalone. So that's our number of SATs, you'll notice that there. And we've just started to look at how do we support our SATs as well. So we've started to look at you know, the terminology of external review of governance. We've heard that's changed, and that's backed by the DFE and the NGA, and what that's going to look like it is going to be very interesting. But we're looking at how do we support schools with compliance, but also help looking at that, reviewing that governance structure to make sure that schools understand what that structure is looking like for them. So how does that drive forward school improvement? And I think that's key. So I'm constantly looking at new ways that we try and support different areas of our educational context. So lots of areas there. So I'm just a little bit more data. You might see I start to really like data. I then said, you know, what are all these mats then? You know, as I say, I'm a chair of a mat, and you know, I'm really passionate about that, and I absolutely love it. But I also wear many hats. I'm also work for the local authority, and the you know, the consistent point being there, it's about good governance, because it's about school improvement. And that's the bit that's really interesting. So I just had a look at how many different mats there were, and looking at that breakdown there. And how do we engage with them, you know? So that's a bit of our Wiltshire context. So then I thought, actually, it is really important. And even in my training, you know, for governors, I put up the school effectiveness strategic priorities. And I always say to people, you know, why do you think I've put this up? Well, that's the context of Wiltshire. Wiltshire, okay, looks at the national context as well to see what is absolutely crucially they need to have their eyes on. And you'll start to notice, you know, Jessica was talking about disadvantaged learners, okay, looking at the safeguarding, new curriculum. So obviously these are national initiatives as well. But also, how does that fit into our context of Wiltshire? So within Wiltshire, that will mean those are the things our school leaders will be having their eyes on, because that's part of their national context. How they contextualise it down for their schools is really, really key as well. So I'm a massive believer in understand your national, your local, but also understand your own context. So if we just take that disadvantaged learners outcomes one, so what does that really mean for Wiltshire then? Because actually that's a national, we've heard a lot about it. Jessica was talking about it. What does that mean for us in Wiltshire? Well, you've got to go back to data, haven't you, a little bit? And governors, sometimes we really do have to go back to data. But we have to understand data as well. And more than that, we need to be being reassured that our schools understand the data and that we've got those strategic questions to ask around it. So I just thought I'd give you that Wiltshire disadvantaged learners. It's quite startling, isn't it? It's not a good picture for Wiltshire. So you can start to see why improving outcomes for disadvantaged learners is on here. One, it's a national drive push forward, but also it's a Wiltshire one, because it's not good enough where we are. It really isn't. And also for you knowing in your schools, that's a local and a national context. So what does that look like in your context for your school? So Wiltshire have set some aspirational targets to say where we are is not good enough. There is a strategy behind it. That within Wiltshire, within the local authority, there is a key person called Kate Wilkins who does some fantastic work with governors with schools. And it is an absolute local authority strategy to drive this forward. So those are the targets there. So again, it just starts to add a little bit more context for me, and I hope it does for you. So then I was like, okay, so let's just go back to what is governance about? Purpose of governance as school leaders. Well, can I stop you there? When I read that statement again and again, it never ever do I lose that feeling of, as a school leader, I think that is crucial. You know, we in governance are part of that leadership and management with a strategic bit, and we don't have our hands on the operational. But in order to be that strategic bit of the leadership team, we have to lead that bit. And that is around accountability, because we need to make sure the best possible care and education for the pupils in the school now and the future. So it's that school now and the future. So what have we got our eyes on now within that school development plan that's about school improvement, but also what do we need to have our eyes on about the national context, about the local context, that we need to sometimes be lifting our eyes up to go, okay, so those are the bits that might be in a working party to look at. But it is really about the best possible care and education for the pupils in the school now as well. Okay, so there's two elements to that, because that's your bit of your strategic priorities, isn't it? The looking up and the going, where does that context fit in with it? But also about those children now. What's that school improvement looking like for them? Because they've only got that one chance at their education. That is it, you know, and by gosh, that has been a challenging time, hasn't it? You know, my daughter was going through year 10 and 11 all through COVID. That's been a challenging time. Not just on education, but massively about well-being and relationships. So, you know, there are lots of things, the permutations that come through to us, isn't there? So what do we need to be thinking about? So again, just a little bit of extra there. So I thought, okay, so yeah, that is the purpose of governance. And can I just remind us, as school leaders, I still think that is just so important to keep saying, as school leaders. And so as school leaders, those are our core functions. And, you know, those three cogs are our logos for Wiltshire, because I want every governor in Wiltshire, every 1,800 of them, to remember what our core functions are. And the big cog is that vision, isn't it? Because actually vision drives everything. Vision has to be that golden thread through our curriculum, through our safeguarding. How do we as governors know what that looks like as it's lived and breathed in our school? Because that's the important bit, because that's how we stress test decisions. As governors strategically, we stress test it against our vision. Is that vision being driven forward, lived and breathed in our school? And also the NGA is really pushing forward with the engagement with all stakeholders. I think David Hill will probably be interested, and I think he might have a bet on when this might become the fourth core function of governance. And so it will be interesting to see what happens. Where will I put that fourth cog? That will be very interesting. But it's true, isn't it? You know, part of governance is about, you know, when you list all those things that your school's good at, I would say that is brilliant. How do you know? How do you know your school's good at that? Because actually, a lot of that time, it's engagement with stakeholders that gives you that clear triangulation, connectedness, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, so every course you come on, you will see that slide, and I make no apology for that. It's crucial that we know that. Do you know what, I think, you know, Ofsted, this is such a great slide. You know, whatever our thoughts are on Ofsted, to see that quality of education as a big square, is that not just brilliant? That's about the children, that's about school improvement. And the other bit of that slide, obviously all of it is fantastic, but that it gives us that real visual about where we fit in it, doesn't it? So for governors, we sit in that leadership and management. Yeah, so remember, we go back to that, what's the purpose of governance? Governance is, you know, as a leader. Yeah, we sit in that leadership with a strategic, we're not operational. But that strategic is, again, about that way forward that we drive the school forward with those strategic discussions and stress testing against our vision. and holding the school to account. And that's a bit where we're going to start to come on to. Roles and relationships around the board. God, they're crucial, aren't they? Right people around the table. Just giving you some more resources that you can go to, and I'm sure lots of people have already seen some of this. But roles and relationships with the board are so crucial, aren't they? And that, you know, the really important one of that the chair, the head teacher, and the clerk, of moving things, moving meetings forwards, making sure that scrutiny of the governors has happened and then is reflected in the minutes, particularly around that outcomes and impact, because that's about school improvement. And just recruitment, I think recruitment's been one of those big areas, hasn't it? It's something that just keeps on coming up all the time. And you know, I've only just put a couple of things down. The Edu Central, there's quite a few blogs on recruitment as well. So if you just wanted to go and research and have a look, I picked up one from there. But yeah, recruitment is something that's really, really crucial and very topical at the moment. And that's, you know, that collaborative approach. You know, I was so fortunate when I came to Wiltshire, I wasn't on my own in governance. Yes, you know, in a sense, I am quite, you know, isolating that, but I have the WGA and we have each other to talk to. And how fantastic is that? Because that is, again, about growing good governance. And that stress test things as well. We all need different platforms and areas to go and talk things through and find out additional information. You know, I think some of you, if you read any of my newsletters sometimes and attend any training about that curious governor, how do we know? And so that real recruitment, it is something that we are working on as a project, and I've probably held up in this last little bit because I've just been so busy with lots of other things. But that recruitment approach, the collaborative approach to recruitment around businesses, because it is vital that, you know, we have, our Wiltshire context is that we have businesses around, and how do we engage with them is absolutely crucial. And you know, that businesses have their volunteering policy. So how can we tap into that? Because actually that is something crucial, because that's about us working collaboratively together. And there's no, again, this is you know, again, a local authority. It is one of their 10-year strap lines as well, building stronger communities. But why don't I use it? Because that's what it's about, isn't it? You know, it's about our community. How do we build those stronger communities? And that recruitment package is going to look at that. So some of the things that we've looked at really was not just, and I think governance, when we go for recruitment, we often talk about the benefit that the person can give the school. Let's not, and it's only 6 meetings, and it's not, no, let's be truthful about what governance is. It's, you know, there's more to it than that. What are the 2 things a governor would need to have? And time capacity and a willingness to upskill and learn. Yeah, you know, loads of governors keep saying to me, but I don't know the questions to ask. And I'm like, but you don't need to know the questions to ask. What you need to know is what the school, are they delivering on their school development plan, overseeing that process, and then saying, so what's the outcome of that? So how can we know what the impact is? Because that's about school improvement. If we're making up questions as governors, are we just making up questions around the operational aspects? You know, I think we have to be much more strategic. So that's a benefit, isn't it? So a benefit for businesses due to extensive training opportunities. CP, you know, we don't call it CPT within governance because obviously it's voluntary work as well, but there is so much training opportunities around to really grow strong governance. So that then becomes beneficial to our communities because you are strengthening our schools by driving forward school improvement. That's the bit we miss out in governance sometimes when we're trying to sell governance. We almost sell it as, I don't mean all of us, and please, if I offend anyone, I'm really sorry. But that, you know, we sell it as a bit of a PTA. It's not. It's about school improvement. So let's talk about school improvement. And then also for the individual, career and personal development by strategically, also I've done a spelling mistake, I've just spotted there, inputting into leadership and management. Where's the evidence of this? You see, David, I do listen to you. Where is the evidence my next slide is going to give you the evidence. Yeah, and this has come from one of our governors who has been on a massive journey. And I think this speaks volumes, and this will be in our recruitment material, because this is about Wiltshire people supporting and growing strong communities. And I just think that is absolutely brilliant. And that's what this recruitment material is going to look like. And I know if I don't go on to my next slide, in a minute, I'm going to get a question. So have you finished reading that? Is that, can I move on to the next slide? So then it's about, so when is it happening? Okay, so the school, the SGS, obviously that's School Governors Services, and the WGA joint project resource pack available in the new year, and that will be a resource pack you can send to businesses. We haven't quite, we've finalising the information in it, but we haven't quite worked out how that's going to be distributed. So we've got to do a little bit more talking around that. So how's that going to be managed as well? Because we really want to make sure that this is well thought through. This isn't reactive, it's really well thought through. What it has highlighted to me is when I joined the local authority, there possibly wasn't enough information around some of our, particularly, you know, let's call it statutory areas as well. So we've made sure all that's on right. But what I'm going through now is starting to develop it. And I'm really aware around recruitment that we need a toolkit which will support recruitment processes of all categories of governors, but also to documents to support best practice. So that's what we're working on for me in the next couple of weeks, is happening in the School Governors Services. So we've got two bits of the recruitment process, the great bit that we're doing with the WGA, and then we've also got that school governance bit as well. So that will be on Right Choice. I would like that bit to be on Right Choice before Christmas. So that's that time frame that we're working on that as well. Yeah, I quite like that slide. Isn't that the case? We often talk about the journey, don't we? But by God, it can have some twists and turns at times, can't it? So how do we and how do I support you as governors on that journey? And I think the biggest challenge for us is really understanding the difference between strategic and operational. I think possibly, and this isn't meant in any, you know, slur or any way, I think we've possibly been involved too much and talking around the operational too much rather than the strategic. I often say if your hands are on something, you're probably in the operational. I do appreciate for small schools, sometimes we had an example of cleaning the toilets as a governor. You know, sometimes you just need hands and feet on the ground to do things. Yeah, I get that. But we've really got to make sure that we've got that strategic approach right. And so, you know, I often, you know, within our training, and I disappear off the screen here, so if you take your step back, that's when you start to become strategic, because you're looking at the big picture, you're considering the context, you're looking at your vision, and you're also saying, okay, so that's the operational process. There's 3 questions. That was the process. I understand that. Okay, I don't need to be involved in it. But my next question is going to be, so what's the outcome? Therefore, what is the impact? And that is the crucial bit. And that's what I've built the whole training package for Wiltshire around probably those 2 slides this year. And that's what we're developing so much more, because it is about, you know, take a step back from the operational, understand that it's happening in your school, because that's what the schools say they're delivering. Absolutely, that's their school development plan. We need to check they're delivering, they say what they're doing. But our job doesn't stop there. And I think that's where it has stopped, possibly too quickly. We need to then be saying, so what was the outcome of that? Therefore, what is the intervention that is happening? How long is that going to be before we can see the impact? Because we need to know what the impact of that is, because that's around school improvement. And that's, so, you know, that's really trying to give you a flavour of where we are and the resources that we've built up now to support you with this, and the monitoring schedule for the in-year monitoring schedule that is absolutely linked to the school improvement plan. And it's absolutely linked. There's, you know, apart from your statutory visits, obviously you've got statutory responsibilities, safeguarding, there will have to be additional visits around those. But no other visit really around that school improvement plan should be happening that is not coming in to monitor a process that is already happening in the school. And I think this is we've probably got this, the schools are saying to us as governors, come in and monitor. Governors are going, I haven't got a clue. What do you mean monitor? Well, you've given me a lead cover, a pupil premium, or it could be curriculum. Well, I don't know anything about that. Well, what am I going to ask? It has to be linked to the school development plan. So what is happening within the school development? So one, what is the bit from the school development plan? Two, and this is where it's this collaborative bit of work between the strategic and the operational, saying to the head teacher and sitting down, those chair of governors and head teachers sitting down and going, so what is happening in your school calendar? An event that, or something that's happening, so it could be a monitoring a visit or something that not a monitoring that's already taking place in the school. How can I, that would then, that I could be part of that. Again, remembering we're not hands-on, we're hands-off. We're understanding that that process has happened, but we're interested in the outcome and the impact. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so, you know, because at the end of the day, how do you as governors show what you know? You know, it's a bit of that working smarter, not harder, isn't it? So, you know, usually, not usually, sometimes it can be said, well, I've heard it from the SLT or I've seen it in a report, and that stops. We've got to be able to say, remember that stress testing, how do you know? So I've seen it through monitoring is one area. Okay, and that monitoring schedule, but I've also received external validation. I know that external validation has been a little bit more tricky these recent years, but there's still absolute key ways in ways you can do that, particularly around collaboration. And that is crucial. So who do we collaborate with? Who do we work with? And I just really wanted to give you that little bit of an overview how we've developed as a department in the school service, the governors services as well. So you'll now start to see that we've doubled the amount of courses that we offer you. We've we've more than doubled from when I first came here, the opportunities to attend training. There are absolutely so many opportunities, and the number of governors attending training historically has gone up twofold. So what it's telling me about Wiltshire is we have these opportunities to work together, understanding our educational context, but basing our absolute common theme and common thread about governance and what good governance looks like across all of that Wiltshire landscape, which is wide and varied, and rightly so. And isn't that a celebration? Because we all bring different aspects. But good governance is good governance is good governance. And that's what we are about in Wiltshire. And that is absolutely crucial. And so I just wanted to just feel out, you know, just how do I engage with governors as well? I have not given you loads of it, but, you know, we have termly newsletters and checklists. We have termly briefings. We're just going to have one tomorrow just for governors. It's on the operational, but there's that what strategic questions do we need to be asking? We have a weekly governor updates, and that's for all schools in Wiltshire. So we're getting out all of that across to all schools, so that whatever context you are. We have governor conference. We have remote clerks conference. Obviously, you'll notice there's a lot of remote here. We have some individual governor support where we can, and bespoke training for collaborations. Reviews and audits, and we're always looking at how we can develop those to support you on your journey. Using information from Right Choice, so a lot of my data comes from this. How do I collect it? How do we improve as a service? How do we meet your needs? I love feedback, by the way. I always use feedback, but it's crucial. WGA, strong links, and I haven't just put that on there, WGA. That is the slide I use when I'm communicating what we do well. You know, it is that is collaboration in Wiltshire, and that is something we need to be proud of. Feedback questionnaires, saying I love that, and Wiltshire Twitter. I have now got a Twitter. I'm coming into the 21st century, and again, that is only because I want for you as governors not to have to trawl through all the Twitter that comes out from Right Choice, because there's so much information. This is just for governors. And so that's really me. You won't have to feed back a questionnaire, because this was the end of my training for another one as well. But what I have done there is put the Twitter account there, and David will know that we, you know, tweet. We on tweet his, and he on tweet. So we're working well together, and really think that it is a really positive celebration for Wiltshire. So I just wanted to thank you for giving me the time to come and speak and share with you.
That was very comprehensive. Thank you very much, AJ. Has anyone got any feedback they'd like to give AJ now while she's with us in the room, or the virtual room?
Thanks, Kirsty.
Well, you said you wanted some.
Absolutely. And any questions, you know where my email address, and I'm always there for any support that you need, and particularly, you know, if those sort of things are of picture interest, we have got lots of training around all of those slides. As I say, they are used in our training.
Thank you. Any questions for AJ, or are you slightly overloaded with information?
Sorry, I'm so sorry if I've...
No, it's not a criticism. It's great to have you here, so thank you. Sean, something in the chat.
I'll send them to David.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we'll make everything available to everyone. That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks, AJ. I will let you rest back and have a glass of water or a little something to recover with. And we're just going to move on now to our new website launch, which has been in beta. We've had quite an ancient website for a long time, and David's been quietly working away on a new one. So David, would you like to do the honours?
Okay, thank you. I don't intend to spend much time on this, just wanted to introduce it. You'll see that we have a new domain name, which is www.wilts-govs.org.uk. This will, well, the site is live now. What we really want to do is put as much information on there about WGA and about what we're doing over the next, well, over time. You'll see that we've got the open meeting on there. I would like you to actually go in, have a look at it. If you've got any comments to make, to come back to us and tell us for things that need to be changed. The key area that we'd like you to focus on almost immediately is the join here. We have a range of email addresses currently, and we do write out to people and we keep them up to date with what is happening. But if you could make sure that yourself and any other governor in your school who wishes to join the WGA to fill this out. And you can see, I mean, it's a lovely green. It's a green that we inherited. It may be something that they might need to change in the future, but you'll also see that we put our tweets to come automatically up to the website. So it's just an introduction. We'll take the beta off, and we hope that you will join WGA through the website. That's all I need to say, Kirsty.
Thank you. And if people think that there is something they would like to see on the website that would be helpful to them, do let us know. I mean, we're conscious we don't want to be a mini NGA because they do it so well, and we don't want to be a mini Right Choice either, because that does it well too. So, but do let us know if there's anything else. But really, the WGA is a really excellent way of evidencing that schools are collaborating and talking together. So if any of you would like to join formally or can encourage other people that you know to join a bit more formally, that would be great, because obviously the more of us who are properly in it, the better, and there's strength in numbers. So that would be really useful. Thank you. So the next part of the meeting is our AGM, which is a little bit more formal, and it's about to look at what we've been doing over the last couple of years. And I'm going to be completely candid and say we haven't been as effective as we might have been for various reasons over the last couple of years. So in fact, there was no AGM last year. We will try to get up to speed again now and make sure that the offer that we have had for all of you as governors from the WGA is improved. We had a fantastic talk earlier in the year from Nathan, which some of you will have been on, which was really good, and we want to try to get more talks like that together, and hopefully one day we can all meet face to face again, because I certainly used to love those days at the Corn Exchange where we were able to network in person. I'm just going to report something else that we've started in this last year, is a networking group for the secondary chairs, which has been very well attended. It's open to one person from each of the secondary schools, so sometimes it's been the vice chair, sometimes it's been the chair, and we've had pretty much full attendance bar a couple of schools, but there are about 9 of us. No, it can't be 9. There are a fair number of us who are on it. There's only about 3 schools who are missing in the whole county, which is great, and we would recommend it as a way of just having a good local chat with like-minded people and exchanging expertise. And it might be something that some of the primary schools would be interested in setting up, and we could potentially help broker that for you and put people together. And it doesn't have to be people necessarily who are close to you in the county. Sometimes it might be useful if it's someone further afield, so there's no sort of competitiveness between the schools, and it's all done under Chatham House rules, and we only share so much without giving too much away. But it's been very, very handy to us at secondary level. So if you're interested in that, let David or I know. And so I've rather sprung that on you, David, but that is something that we thought would be useful, and we'll go ahead with it. So I'm afraid there are no minutes and matters arising from the 2020 AGM, which is on my agenda here, because, as I said, there wasn't one. So we're actually going to move on now to the Treasurer's report, which John will present, and won't cover a huge amount of stuff for reasons previously mentioned. We've been rather quiet. So, John, would you like to discuss our situation?
Yes, thank you very much, Kirsty. David is very kindly going to screen share, I think, the balance sheet. Thank you, David. That's good of you. You'll notice there's very little expenditure. For those of you who are new to WGA, I would like to thank Wiltshire Council, because they were instrumental in providing the funding for WGA. So the money in your left-hand column there, the income which arrived some years ago now, has all been from Wiltshire Council. So we'd like to express our thanks for that. And because it was a generous amount, that is why Kirsty mentioned that all the membership of WGA is free to all schools. So there were just 2 items of expenditure: the clerking for 2 meetings which we had in 2019, including the last AGM which we had, which was in October 2019, and also the website hosting of our new, of our old website. So those are the only 2 items of expenditure. I do need to say to you that unfortunately, several members of the committee have stood down for various reasons. And so we've had very great difficulty getting the signature change for members to ensure that there is a payment of accounts. So that, I'm very pleased to say, has now been resolved, but it did take a long time to sort out. So I do need to explain that, which is why there is no expenditure to the National Governors Association, and in fact we do owe them, so there will be an additional expenditure next year. So hopefully that's clear. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to field them. Thank you, Kirsty.
Thank you very much. And the other thing to bear in mind, we are hoping to employ a clerk as well, just to help us get back on the straight and narrow. So that may be reflected as well in the accounts next year, if we can get that sorted out in time. Are there any questions for John on those very tiny accounts? No. Okay, thank you very much. So the next thing on the agenda is to let you know that the board has elected officers. So Claire Tunnicliffe, who was chair for some years, has stood down, which is why he's been landed with me. David has agreed to take on the role of secretary, which has been fantastic so far. Can't thank him enough because I've been so busy at work. And John is staying as treasurer. So those are the officers for the WGA at the moment. We have had to, well, we haven't had to, we have reviewed our constitution because it's been in place for a very long time. And Kevin, who is one of our board members, is going to talk you through it. Now, we should have sent this out with the agenda and we haven't, and it's in our constitution that we should have done that. But there are not too many people left on this call, and it has been put together by the board. So Kevin will talk you through the principal changes, and we hope that you'll agree to adopt it with us.
Once I've unmuted my microphone.
Thank you. You've got a lot of tabs there.
Yeah, getting there. Hopefully you can now see just the document in front of you.
We can see it, yes, so
Brilliant.
far away.
Yeah, I just thought I'll give you a quick skim through the existing constitution, which was last reviewed and agreed in October 2013. So although Kirsty says we haven't done much over the past couple of years, we did take the opportunity to look at this and revamp it. I'm not going to go through it line by line, but this is just, as I say, a quick scan through the existing one. This is the updated one. If the changes were quite small, I'd show you what they were, but actually what we've done is really taken the opportunity to thoroughly review and update the constitution, particularly in terms of our aims, our management of the board, and the activities that we do. Nothing of the existing constitution has been removed, really. We've just updated it. And particularly in terms of activities, what it does is actually record what we are now actually doing. And again, it's the same with the aims and the management of the board. It reflects how we've moved and changed our processes and our way of working since the last review in 2013. And a fairly small point, but a significant point, is that the Constitution now recognises the terms governor and trustee and governing body and academy trust, which it never did before. I don't really think there's much benefit in going through it line by line because we'll be here for quite a while, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
There are no hands up at the moment. As I said earlier, we are going to have to ask those of you who aren't on the board to take us on trust that we have reviewed it quite thoroughly over time, and this will be going on the website. So, but we would like to formally adopt it. If people are uncomfortable with that, having not read it thoroughly, then say so. But if you're happy to take it on trust, that the board have spent some time working on it, that would be helpful. So I'm going to propose that we adopt it. And could I have a seconder, please? I can't see any hands going up because we're still screen sharing. You might want to stop screen sharing, or if people could, someone could put a little hand up just to say they would support it. Right, John's got his hand up, so John is prepared to second it. So could I ask all those in favour, and if anybody is not in favour, shout out now. No hands going up at all. Okay, I'm going to go ahead, and David's got his up. I'm going to go ahead and adopt it. But if people are unhappy about this process, thanks, Chris, then let us know later. Lisa, thank you very much. Okay, that's it. I'm going to take it as adopted, but let me know if you're unhappy offline and we'll sort it out and review it and bring it back. Thank you, Kevin. So we've also drawn up a new memorandum. Well, in fact, it's our first memorandum of understanding, which is about the way that we work with the local authority. I'm just going to try and find that one here. So this has been shared with AJ, and she's happy about it, and it's just to make sure that there's an understanding and a distinction between the way that we work and the way the local authority works, and to spell out how we work together, and that we're not in opposition to each other, but it also stresses the independence of the WGA from the LA, which is important because we need to have that distinction. So you can see that we lobby Wiltshire, LA, and through the NGA, the government, on behalf of governing bodies. So it's just very important that everybody understands that, and that's the Constitution. I'm really sorry, I've really got that completely wrong. Hang on. The MOU is similar to that extent. Just bear with me, I'll share the right one. Sorry about that. Stop share.
Kirsty, you were sharing the right document.
I was showing the Constitution, not the MOU.
I was reading the MOU, I promise.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, definitely.
There you are. Sorry, why? I don't know what happened there. Okay. Thank you. I think I had a brain freeze moment. It's been a bit of a week. Right, so here you are. So you can see about the LA and the WGA working together, appointing governor representatives to sit on the council school forum, which is something we're going to come on to in a minute. So, and again, that's it. And I have yet to sign it. That's my next task, if everybody here is happy with it. Again, I'm asking you to take it a little bit on trust, because we've spent some time on it. So could I have someone to second that? And again, if you're not happy with it, let me know later. But in the meantime, we will try to get it sort of through. So I'm going to propose it. I know this isn't exactly the perfect way of doing it. Chris, thank you for seconding it. And all in favour. Lisa, thank you. And thank you some of those others, David and Kevin. Thank you very much. So sorry, I'm sorry about this being slightly unorthodox, but we really need to get moving forwards, and it's the fastest way of doing it. And I do apologise because work has rather got in my way. So that's that. The next thing is the schools forum recruitment. And again, an important part of the function of the governing body is, Stella, did you want to ask a question? Or was that your hand?
No, sorry, Kirsty, I'm just playing with my reaction, sorry.
That's all right.
Sorry.
I hope it's a positive reaction, that's all that matters. It's a wave, so that's good. So the schools forum representatives, that's one of our functions as WGA, and we are short of one, but I'm going to ask David to talk through a little bit, because David sits on the school forum and he can explain a little bit more about the function and why it's important that we find someone else to sit there.
Okay, and actually, just so that everybody doesn't get bored with hearing the same voices, may I ask Lisa for you to just explain the function of the schools forum, because you are clearly very involved with it. Is that possible, Lisa?
I thought you might. Am I allowed to read from the screen? Because I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Read the screen.
Yes, so I am clerk to Wiltshire Schools Forum. I'm also a clerk to a school here in Chippenham. Yes, we have different representatives for Schools Forum. We're made up of different head teachers from primaries, secondaries, and special schools, and then from academies. We have early years representatives. We have counsellors, the cabinet member for children's services. We have the portfolio holders for education and SEND. We have a range of people come together 4 to 5 times a year on a Thursday afternoon, and we obviously talk about mostly school funding, finances, consultation, and we need more governor representatives. I think this vacancy has been there for quite a little while. David's a representative. We have another one from the special school, the special school in Chippenham. I think is this a primary governor representative we're speaking? Yeah.
So sorry.
So yeah, please join us. Make up the numbers and come to our great meetings.
Thank you, Lisa. So really, if anybody would wish to put their hands up now as a primary school governor, then we'd be delighted. Otherwise, if you could have a conversation, I think, and just contact either myself or Kirsty, we would be delighted to have a fourth representative from the governors. Say it's 4 or 5 times a year. It's Thursday afternoon. It lasts for about 3, sometimes 4 hours when we're discussing funding. And it's really crucial that we have governor representation there. Thanks, Kirsty.
Yeah, I think it's especially important while we're still waiting for the NFF to be rolled out properly. So it is a really good chance for you to have a say about how money is spent. So if you don't want to do it, but you know anyone who might and could put the word out to any other schools or governing boards that you know, we really do need to do this and get someone in post. And we don't want to have to strong arm anyone to do it. But I think while the meetings are online, and I suspect they may stay online in a hybrid way, one way or another, she said, optimistically, it might be easier for people to attend rather than having to go to Trowbridge. Does that sound reasonable, David? Yeah. So that actually is, I believe, the end of the meeting. I don't think I've missed anything. So has anyone got anything else that they would like to say before we close? And if anybody has any ideas of other talks or anyone else they would like to hear from at a future WGA event, that would be useful to know as well. And equally, you're probably all wrung out by now with too much information. So do feel free to get in touch with us after. So in the absence of hands, I'm going to close the meeting. But thank you very much, everyone, for coming along this evening. And we will get out a lot more information to you soon about future events. Thank you.